Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Biz Dev Podcast, the podcast about developing your business. I'm David Baxter, your host, and I am joined by my Mary Kay associate, Gary Voigt. How's it going, man?
I'm very, very close to that pink Cadillac. I got the big sticker across the back window, but that pink Cadillac's mine. I'm telling you.
Nice. Getting to that Ruby status. Well done. That's because all the foundation that I buy from you every month.
Okay, I knew about the car. You knew about the status name? You're higher up on the pyramid than I am, I guess.
I could go on about MLMs forever. One of our clients years ago was, she was a consultant for, Rodan and Fields, and she was really high up. And so she went all into how all that stuff works. It is crazy. Not that one specifically. She was just talking about generally, but whoa, it was, crazy stuff. Anyway, so we are joined, more importantly, we are joined by Tristin Sweeney, who is a startup operations and product consultant. So tell me a little bit about yourself and your company.
Absolutely. David, Gary, thank you both for having me here. I do appreciate you guys inviting me to be on the podcast. It's a really cool opportunity. A little bit about myself. So I have been fascinated with entrepreneurship since I was a little kid. I think oftentimes people who find themselves in that position realize pretty early on that fascination with it in some capacity. And I had that same experience that then followed me through middle school and high school and into college. And that's where I really kind of narrowed down how that was going to look for myself. And I really became enamored with this concept of startups and how they operate and how they're different from kind of growth and enterprise size companies. And so that's what I ended up sort of focusing my education on, at least in the later stages, and then really dove right into spending times kind of in the trenches with startups, whether it be, I've had my own company before, as well as working with a nice little list of early stage, seed stage companies, and really getting to understand the operations behind them. Where I really found fascination was a lot of the things that entrepreneurs don't like, which is the back end operations and the things that kind of make the company tick, which is the not sexy part of the startup world. It's the stuff that just kind of has to get done. But that's really where I found sort of a love and a passion for working in that space and really helping founders check that box. And as we'll kind of refer to traction a little later as well, the idea of an integrator, that's really where I kind of find myself.
So you go into, let me see if I can paraphrase that so my little mind can understand it. You walk into a company. Now, are these companies, you're saying seed stage, so that's usually founder plus a dude or dudette, right? There's only a few of them at that stage, right? Generally in seed stage. So when you're talking about operations and stuff, it's pretty minimal at that place.
Are you just laying the groundwork and the foundation for them to build off of because they're in a place where growth is going to start? Or is it before growth happens that you're just kind of planting the seed?
I think it depends on how aware the founding team is of what they need. So seed stage, I think, can mean a lot of things. So for a lot of companies, seed stage, you have a team, you have product market fit, you're sort of moving towards that growth stage. Pre-seed would be kind of what I would describe as more of what you're saying, where really a couple of founders maybe really starting to just formulate the idea. In most situations, that's not, at least now where I am in my career now, where I would plug in. So it's usually once like, all right, we've figured out we have product market fit. We've sort of tested this idea in a way that we've started building our MVP, or we already have our MVP, and we are really ready to push towards growing this business in the market. Or what oftentimes happens is they did that and they started this growth, and now they have real growing pains. They're associated with the fact that they didn't think about operations and sort of strategic ways of moving customers through their process beforehand, and now they have the pain points of it, and they need to rapidly fix it so that they can continue to grow and it doesn't become a barrier.
So how do they find, they know that they need it? We have the same problem. People need what we do, but they don't even know what to Google to find it. Like I need a startup operations guy. That's not something you're going to type. So how does that work? How do you find these people? Because they don't exist. You can't go and buy a list from, Duns and Bradstreet for all the startups in your area.
It's very hard to market to startups specifically because they don't really exist yet.
Yeah, no, it's true. Like, so I think, like anything else, whether it be sales or marketing, the idea is to meet somebody where they already are. So in a digital ad space, that's going to mean advertising on a platform that they're already using, or it's going to be targeting keywords they're already searching. For me, it's meeting these entrepreneurs and these founders where they already are. They're going to these networking events. They're going to startup specific programming. They are going to the meetups. And for me, it's a lot about just going and meeting people who then, more than anything, word of mouth is how things get around. Because I think what I think would be difficult, and I have not explored this, so I'm making an assumption here, is that like trying to do this on a nationwide level feels like it would be sort of near impossible. Trying to make yourself known and relevant in every startup hotspot around the country would be really, really challenging. And so for me, I've really hyper focused on this triangle locale because I think one, there's a ton of opportunity and there's a ton of really interesting companies. Two, there's a remarkable pool of talent and people to choose from to help build these companies. And three, there's a real lack of resources. As much as we see this area as a up and coming startup hub and a place where innovation is happening, the rest of the country is like loosely aware of it, but where a lot of the major resources are, they're not concentrating efforts here. And so sometimes these founders are just kind of lost. Like they know they need help. They don't really know where to look for it. Every door that they knock on is like, oh, well, if you don't have $1 million in revenue, we're not going to talk to you. And that leaves them kind of on this island. And so it's sort of helping meet them where they are and then build a relationship first and foremost and go from there.
So referrals. That's a very fancy way of saying referrals, which is where we live, right? It's like no one spends big bucks on custom software because they found a Google ad, right? That's just not how it works. And so we're in the same boat. So yeah, we talk about that pretty regularly is networking. You never stop networking when you're, I guess I should say this. If you're a product company, maybe at some point, if I'm selling jeans, maybe I can stop networking at some point because you get your own gravity, right? They start coming to you. I want my Z Cavalrici jeans. I'm coming. That was for you, Gary.
Wow.
Going way back, baby. You've got your name and people come to you, your Levi's or whatever. A Bugle Boy, anybody? No? Okay. Sorry. My wife will appreciate that one. But when you are a consulting firm, you're never going to have that gravity. I think when you were saying, can you be a national firm that does that? I think at that point, you're like Y Combinator, right? You have this national recognition, but I mean, can you create a new Y Combinator? For those who don't know, Y Combinator is like the granddaddy of all accelerator programs. If you, like they brought up Airbnb, and I know I'm forgetting a ton. Most of the really big ones that dominate the world right now somehow are related to Y Combinator. And to create one of those now would be almost impossible. I mean, Techstars is out there. There's a few of those national names that they tried to have one here called Startup Factory. It worked well for a while and then died. But those are really hard to make. But that's the kind of thing you're talking about if you were on a big scale. But even those guys, it's not like Bank of America, right? They're just everywhere. Even right. Those guys, they're well known, but they still bring them to they only have one location. So anyway.
And also some of the guests that we've interviewed in the past, most of them actually, networking and referrals are basically top of the list for how they get new business, or at least in the beginning, until they, like David said, have their own gravity. But it seems to be a common thread.
The difference is if you have a product company, eventually you might be able to wander away. Like I was a few episodes ago, I candidly admitted I thought I was done networking. And I thought I had reached a point where we were big enough that in our little neck of the woods, we were getting big. Yeah. Now that was a dirty, dirty lie. We did fine. We do fine. But we weren't growing with new clients. Like our existing clients were growing and using us, and we have very low turnover in that regard. But finding new clients requires networking for us. And so I had to swallow my pride and get back out there again as though I'm a noob, which is fine. It's different to go there when you're by yourself, when you're a one-man shop and you're just kind of hanging your shingle on anybody who will pay your billable rate, and you have a team of 10 people. That's a different feel, but it's still networking. I went to a Chamber of Commerce meeting the other day, and it was the first one I'd been to. And man, I felt like I was brand new again. Like I walked in this room, I know zero people, and I'm looking around. I'm like the kid on his first day of school, and no friends, gonna go sit and eat in the corner, right? And I'm just eating my little snacks because no one wants to talk to me, and I don't know who to talk to. And I know the only value I got out of that in terms of the learning experience. I mean, it was a cool program. Don't get me wrong, but I know because I've done this before that it will get better. When you first do that the first time, you're the kid at the dance with no date, and you're just hoping to God somebody will look at you. Sorry, see, this is what my interviews are like, right?
Well,
Just me
Tristan,
talking. That's just what happens.
yeah. Tristan's been to a lot of these events, so Tristan might have some pointers. Tristan might have, I guess, some methods or at least some advice to kind of make you feel not like a noob, but someone that's comfortable enough going around and shaking hands.
Yeah, I think that my number one tactic is nobody wants to be pitched to ever, really just as a general rule, unless they specifically invite you. So it's very relational. My opening is always, what do you do? Tell me about your world. Tell me about what it is that you are doing. And that inevitably, in nearly every situation, leads to them following up and saying, and what do you do? Unless they really just don't care, in which case probably a dead end conversation there anyway, and you can kind of move on to the next person. But I find that when you just lead with that is just being genuinely interested in what they're doing, which as a business, you also are genuinely interested in what they're doing. And you might realize 30 seconds of the conversation, it's not going to be a fit for you, but that's okay because that's not actually why you're there. Or at least it's not why you should be there. You're there to build relationships. You are there to listen and hear what other people are doing and find potential good fits for what it is that you do. And so I think when you approach it that way and you approach people that way in a way of genuine interest in what they're doing, you're able to kind of quickly develop those conversations into something that has the potential to be beneficial. And it might be that you drive value to them because they mentioned something that they need during that conversation. And while you can't provide it, you know somebody who can, and you're happy to make an introduction. Or you might find that they are a direct fit for you, or they might find that when you start talking, they don't actually need what you have to do, but they know somebody who just told them earlier today that they were looking for exactly that thing, and they can make that connection. And so I think between being very relational, and then the second piece for me is always trying to provide some sort of value to the other person in the conversation that you're having, automatically puts you in a different spot on their list of consideration if they're going to go look for somebody who's providing the services that you're providing, or if they know somebody looking to provide the services that you're providing. And so that's always my approach, is build a relationship and try to provide immediate value. Maybe there's something you heard in what they said that you have expertise in and you have a piece of advice that you can offer. Anything like that that just feels because it is genuine, I think helps move that needle and expand that network in a meaningful way that can actually lead to new business.
I want to change gears for a second and dive more into what you're specifically doing. So I'm a seed stage startup dude, and I've got a product out there. Let's say I've got a V1 that Big Pixel built me. It's amazing. And you like what I did there, Gary?
Yeah, we only build.
I've got all this ready to go. I've got some traction. I'm starting to notice some. What are some early signs that I need your services? Someone like you. What squeaky wheels start showing up early that might make me think I'm about to lose this train?
So I think there's a few different key areas. So I work with, I would say, two very distinct types of founders. I either work with highly technical founders who don't have as much of the sort of like business sense. They created something that they're really excited to share with the world, but they don't maybe really know how to share it with the world. For them, it's really about building like a go-to-market plan. It's about figuring out how are we going to find these customers? How are we going to approach them? You probably need to hire somebody to do sales, because if that's who you are, you might not be the best person to be pitching your product, to be selling your product. If you're on the opposite side and you're not a technical founder at all, and in the businesses that I work with, which are primarily B2B or B2C, SaaS or software as a service, if you're not a technical founder and you have, like, let's say you're using a firm like you guys, or like more oftentimes what I see with early stage stuff is like an outsourced development firm, then there's going to be a communication gap. There's a language that development teams speak in the sense of how they talk about the product, how they talk about what they're building, how they scope out sprints. And then there's what you want, which is you're like, I want to be able to click that button and it do this. And there's a gap there somewhere, which is that they need a level of detail that the founder doesn't necessarily have the ability to provide. And the founder doesn't understand what they're saying as they're talking about developing this product. I oftentimes find that I can sit in the middle there and help that communication in a really productive manner that allows the founder to get what they want in an efficient manner and the development team to be able to utilize their normal language and talk about their product development process in the way that they normally would. And I can kind of communicate back and forth between the two. So with that, pain points will kind of exist in a couple different places. On the product side, pain points will come up in the sense that they will not feel like they're getting the product that they're asking for on a consistent basis. They're asking for something to be built, it gets built, it's not what they're looking for. That's constantly frustrating. You have a lot of technical debt that goes into that as they're trying to develop. That's one place where I can plug in, or they'll start to feel that pain point. On the flip side, if they're highly technical, you talk about them starting to grow, where they're really going to start to feel pain is when they find themselves focusing on all these really specific problems within the process that's distracting them from focusing on the bigger picture and what they're really trying to do. Oftentimes it's things like deals are slipping through the cracks, or getting to the signature stage, and then things are falling apart because they don't have a process to support the customer in the way they need to be supported. Or they're getting onboarded, but then things are falling apart and they're having a lot of churn because the customer doesn't know how to use the product, or they're having a hard time getting the value out of it that they were sold. So that can be an implementation problem. It can be a customer success problem. It can be a sales process problem. It can be a problem that you have a sales guy who's pitching and selling something that you can't even offer. Like, there's a variety of places where it can appear, but oftentimes as a founder, you don't have time, or it's the wrong use of your time rather, to get into all those specific areas. It's really, you need somebody who has what I would call that co-founder capacity to look at all of those problems and deal with them so that you can focus on your sort of hot list of goals and what you're trying to accomplish as a founder, as moving the business forward in big ways.
You remind me of a story. I might have told this story before, but that's okay. I'll tell it again because not everybody's heard it. When I was a consultant early on, I was a tadpole developer. I was working for the Florida state. I was in their House of Representatives. And I was with this big consulting firm. I was very tiny in this thing. And the sales guys had brought in an expert in, at the time, crystal reports. Just, man, we got that. No problem. We can bring that person. We'll fly them in. They're going to be an expert. Dude comes in. He's like 23. And he'd never seen crystal reports in his entire life. He had to go and hide behind the closed doors. They called it a ramp-up session so that the client had no idea what was happening. And the architect and him learned how to do crystal reports enough so we could bamboozle, not we, but I was not involved in this, thank you, but they could bamboozle the client to thinking, yes, in fact, this guy knew what he was talking about. And that, from that point on, that left like a brand on my soul that I never trust salespeople. Ironically, I am one now, so there you have it.
Right, and I think that same brand actually exists on consultants in a lot of times, and I don't necessarily think it's unfounded, especially because most people are familiar with like really big consulting firms and what those engagements might look like, and really, really high billing rates. And somebody who's going to come in and oftentimes, more than anything, they identify problems that you already knew existed, and that's their pitch. We're going to find the problems for you. And I think while there's maybe a time and a place for that for certain companies, what I spend a lot of my sort of effort in the way that I talk to potential customers and potential clients on is I am an impact focused and sort of like hands-on focused consultant. I want to come in and I want you to feel like I am as close to a part of your internal team as possible. I'm not there to just sit there and work with you in a strategy session and help you figure out what these problems that really you already know are and just help you define them. I'm really there to help you build solutions to those problems and then implement those solutions for you because you don't have time to. And that's where I think there's a distinct difference. I'm not a strategic consultant in the sense of I want to come in here and help you build the plan. It's like, we're going to plan and we're going to come up with We're going to identify your problem. We're going to identify the right solution. And then I'm going to do it for you so that you can focus on the thing that you need to be focused on, or the things that you need to be focused on.
Do you find yourself with the title of fractional CTO a lot?
I would say more like a fractional COO, or like a fractional product owner. So yes, those two kind of define exactly what it is that I do.
Okay. Very cool. Yeah. I mean, a lot of what you're describing is stuff that we fight the same fights, is trying to make sure that clients understand nerd speak and translating that to business speak, because nerds speak a different language, not world. That doesn't make any sense, but they speak differently, and they get frustrated if they can't speak in their natural way. So I often find myself in that role, and it's always entertaining because
And as much as a client would love to talk to the developers, what you said earlier is specific. They don't know how to talk to each other, and that miscommunication just always leads to problems.
well, it's funny how many ask us, because we make it's not a secret. We do not generally expose our developers to our clients for exactly this reason. And every time a new client, that especially if they're coming from a different development situation, like if they had a dude who was building everything and they were used to managing the dude, and they like that in some ways and they hated it in others. And generally when we point it out, they realize that our way is better, because you're not saying words you don't understand, and they're not blowing smoke up your skirt because they can. And that's probably why they're getting rid of the dude. But it's a very common thing, but they always ask us, hey, so are we going to work directly with the devs? And the answer is absolutely not. No. I mean, you can meet them. They're great people. You'll really like them. They're nice, but you don't want to work with them. And that's why we have PMs, and those PMs are the ones who are constantly doing that dance of nerd speak to biz speak and back and forth. And that's something I think if I were to advise a lot of non-technical startups, which is again most of our clients, if you are that guy, don't try to dive in there with the devs too much. I mean, if you want to, we have some clients that love nerding out, and that's fine. Here, let's do this. You can talk directly to the dev. That's fine. But most will not do well. They will not handle devs are little snowflakes, and they are a particular bunch, and you have to, I am one, I've been one for 20 years. This is coming from a true place, but they speak different, and it's not a bad thing for you to have a little layer in between. I think your product generally will end up better because the devs will understand their guy better, because he's going to speak their language, and you're going to understand the business side better. So if you are that founder who's wanting to get in there with the devs, be careful, because that's a real easy way to absolutely build the wrong app, build an app that you did not expect.
I think it's really a matter of just like getting them to understand it in a way that they are familiar with. So like we have all come to accept that we hire an accountant to do our taxes. It's not because we can't do the taxes. It's not because we can't get in there and spend all the time and try and learn and figure it out. But somebody knows how to do it already, and they don't need you to tell them how to do their job. They need you to give them everything they have. You're going to have somebody who's managing that project for you. They're going to have a team of staff accountants who are doing a lot of the number crunching. But you're not going to interface directly with them, and you're looking for the end result, and you want to give them everything they need to do so. And so I think it's just a matter of getting people to a place where they really understand why product and engineering are very different things, even though they're oftentimes kind of construed as the same. They're two components of a system, both of which are equally important.
That's a good way to explain it. I was going to say earlier, there's always the time, or it comes to a point where the business person will ask something of the devs, and the devs will say, not necessarily that they can't do it, but maybe it can't be done that specific way that it was asked. And that little point of headbutting right there, well, I want it to do this. And then devs saying, well, we can't make it do that way. Then it's like, you can't build what I want. No, that's not what we said. Well, what did you mean? And then right there sparks the negative attitude from both sides going against each other.
We always answer that with the answer is always yes. The question is always budget. Yeah. That's because we can do anything you want, but you probably don't want us to do that because We are really big, and I think anyone who's outsourcing their dev to an external team, even an internal team, if I'm being honest, but the concept of bang for your buck should be always front of mind, because a dev can wander down a rabbit hole and lose 3 or 4 days on the dumbest stuff. And you've just got to make sure that you've got them focused on the biggest bang for your buck. Because, oh man, you really want that animation to be just like this. Okay, that animation might take 4 days to get it just like that. Is it really worth that? I don't think so. So, and you need someone who you've built up a trust with that can tell you, no, that's a bad idea. And if you don't have that person, you're going to end up going way over budget and missing every deadline you ever
Yes,
had.
absolutely.
We've been doing a bit of a series you're number two, on hiring. And I know because of some of the your past roles that you've worked at, you've hired and worked in the hiring business a lot. So what is it, if you're a startup or you're hiring your first people, or just getting some momentum behind you, what are some strategies that you would say is good for hiring and finding the right people?
Yeah, I think that first and foremost is culture fit. The idea of having somebody who fits within the type of person that both you and anyone else on your team are, and the type of people that you expect to be joining the company. And culture, I think, gets tossed around a lot. It's used to describe things as kind of casual as, do you have a ping pong table at the office? But really, when you talk about culture as it relates to hiring, it's really about the type of people that you are and the way that you work as a team together. So it's, how do you expect people to take initiative? How do you expect people to respond to leadership? How do you expect people to seek out growth or maintain stability? There's a lot of different aspects of how a person acts and what they believe that impacts how they work. And so I think that's the number one thing. Beyond that, it's really about having the right person in the right seat, meaning you can have the right person doing the wrong thing, but having the right person doing the right thing where both they feel fulfilled in the role and what they're doing, and you feel like you're getting the value that you expected and ideally more out of that role as you planned it.
Now you're using traction language right there. Are you a fan of traction?
I am a fan of traction. I think
it
helps. It really helps drive an infrastructure to build off of, specifically when you're first getting started and as you enter growth stages, but really giving yourself a foundation to build off of and modify to become your own. Because I think you have to use that as a guide, but things are going to change for each individual company as those specific situations kind of curate themselves.
So let me dig in there a little bit. So hiring the right person for the right seat, values, alignment, all those fun things. But the practical side of that, what does that mean? I mean, if I know my values as a company, right? Ideally, as the owner, I have taken the time to write that out and figure out who I am in terms of as an enterprise. But how do I practically find someone? I'm in an interview for an hour, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is it that I can do to find success in finding out that right fit within an hour or so?
So I think there are a variety of strategies there. There are tools that you can use to help you. There are companies and businesses that have sort of automated this process using, a lot of times it's like survey methodology. So taking a defined set of questions, having the employer answer those questions as it relates to what they are looking for, and then having independently the candidate answer those questions around how they would self-describe. And the trick with that is not having them be positives or negatives, but a matter-of-fact statement and a spectrum, both of which could be construed as positive and or negative, so that it doesn't drive the candidate to a specific answer. And then it's quite simply kind of comparing and contrasting those and figuring out, all right, how close are we? What's our standard deviation off of each of these data points? And that can then drive questions that you ask in an interview. If you don't use a system like that, I think you can kind of do the same thing during the interview. So you can take those key areas that you've outlined for yourself around what's important to you, where you lie on that spectrum, and then ask in an ideally non-leading way for the candidate to sort of self-describe within those areas as well, without talking too much about how you feel about it on the front end, which can be tricky because everybody wants to kind of talk about who their company is, who they're looking for. But in that specific sense, the more honest of an answer you can get out of the candidate, the better sort of outcome you're going to have from that type of conversation.
Do you know any tricks or any language or questions that can actually kind of get to the heart of those? Any hacks?
Yeah, I mean, there are so typically when we've done it in the past, and I'm going to actually reference one of the companies that I worked with, which is Scouter. We broke everything down into two kind of distinct categories. There was team culture, and then there was work style. Team culture was about how you actually interact with the team. So it would be questions around your communication style, or questions around the type of expectations that teammates have for one another in terms of supporting each other within work. Is it a very independent team, or is it a very collaborative team? Is it a very top-down leadership? Is it a very flat leadership? Those types of kind of scenarios, which different people will thrive in different scenarios as it relates to that. And then we have work style, which is very independent. That's about how that person prefers to get their work done. That's where you can talk about, do you prefer to be remote? Do you prefer to work in an environment where there's a lot of ambiguity and your role really allows you to define itself? Or do you need a specific set of instructions? And when given those, you're going to execute without a doubt 100% on every single one of those. Questions like that will allow you to, one, define your role better, because I think that's one area where a lot of times startups specifically struggle, is they say, I need somebody to do customer success. Awesome. What does that role actually look like for you? And how do you define what that role is? Because it could mean a variety of different things in a variety of different companies. And it could be a very independent action that just sits in a seat by itself and they handle customer success, or it could be really collaborative with your product team and with your sales team. I think it helps you define that role in order to find the right candidate as much as it helps you find the right candidate.
It's funny. You talking about hiring makes me realize how bad I am at it. Man, I tell you what, yours is so organized. Here's how I interview people. I talk like 80% of the time. 80% of the time is me talking and telling them what the role is and what I expect for them. And then the other 10% of them is agreeing and telling me that that's exactly what they do and they will be the best at it. So I'm realizing, man, I'm really bad at this. But it's funny because you're like, hey, ask questions in a non-leading way. And I'm like, there is no way that I am not just absolutely wearing a flag around my whole body telling you this is the right answer. And yeah, I'm really bad at that. Okay, I'm going to go and take some notes to myself. This is really sad. Okay. I feel really bad, but I need ice cream. Anyway, so if you were that's a fun way of saying that. 5 years ago, running into you're a startup-y guy, or any of your clients even, honestly, that this would go into both. And they wanted 3 pieces of advice from you on how do I do this? How do I get into business? How do I take care of my business? Or how do I run my business? Maybe that's a better way of asking it for you. What would be your top 3 pieces of advice for that startup founder?
I think my number one piece of advice would be, don't force yourself to learn all of the hard lessons yourself. Use the network and the resources and the people that you know who have gone through it to learn those hard lessons from them and not have to do it on your own. Because I think to some degree, especially as you get into specific niches of startups, it's a little bit less of an art and a little more of a science, which I think is potentially a hot take for some people. There are like defined ways that you can do things that are going to set you up for success, much more so than other ways that you could potentially be doing it. And you don't need to figure that out yourself if other people have already figured it out and can help you. So I'd say, one, use that network of resources and ask for and utilize the help that you have. 2 would be understand the value of equity in both directions. 1, you shouldn't give up everything just to try to make this happen. Otherwise, you're going to get down the line and you're going to stop feeling like what you're doing is worth the amount of time you're putting into it, because you're not going to get enough value out of it on the back end.
Man, I'm going to interject there because that one really hits me hard. I hate dev companies that come in there and say, hey, you need me. So in order for me, and it's not, I shouldn't say dev companies. This is usually a dude, but I'm going to be your technical guy. And because I'm your technical guy, you can't do this without me. So I need at least 40% of all of the company equity. Yeah. Man, I hate that guy. That guy is lying to you. Anybody who's listening to my voice, my dulcet tones here, and you hear that, they are lying to you and you need to run. Statistically speaking, 90% of your success as a founder is going to be on you, not the dev. The dev, on average, if you're doing an equity swap, is usually around 4%. Give or take. You can plus or minus that a little bit. 4%, not 40, 4. And so I hate that. Sorry, you hit a hot button for me, and I think it's something worth mentioning.
And that's coming from a developer turned founder, so
right.
Trust that.
I don't. It just really bothers me because a lot of people, to me, that's smoke, right? That it's making yourself seem important. They're in a desperate situation because they're not technical and they think that they cannot do this without you. That's not true. Just keep going. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your top 3, but that one really gets me.
No, I think you're spot on now, but I do think it is really important to also talk about the flip side of that, which is, hey, guy or gal, your idea and all of your equity in your idea is worth this right now. Like,
he's holding up 0, by the way, for you in audio.
Yeah, I'm holding up 0. Yeah, it is worth nothing. Owning 100% of nothing is nothing. Do not double down on that. You want to incentivize and then reward the people who help you make it happen. That's co-founders. That's your early team. That's the people, the advisors along the way who are helping you. What it isn't is letting an investment firm take advantage of you. That's not worth it.
Sure.
But it is giving them an understanding that they are taking on a lot of risk if they're going to put money into your company, especially at an early stage. If you have an idea and you're asking somebody to give you money, you are going to have to give up something meaningful for them to see any possibility of it maybe working. And I think sometimes founders don't appreciate that as much because they're so convinced that it is going to work. And you want the best for them. I hope that every founder who comes up with an idea, it works. Unfortunately, the statistics show otherwise. And so you have to understand that when you're going out and asking for these things. Or if you're asking your buddy who's a dev to work on your project, quit his job and work on your project full time. One, unless you've got some real cash to throw around, then you better be ponying up some equity because you're asking them to take a pretty significant cut of what their life looks like to also make a bet on you. If everything falls apart, you're not going to be able to recoup that cost that they incurred for them. So they're taking a bet too. So I think it's balancing. Don't give up the whole barn. However, understand that without these key pieces who are going to help you get to that level of success, you're more than likely not going to be able to get there. And it's going to mean you're going to split up the company into some pieces that you're going to share with those people. And they're going to be incentivized both short term and long term as you continue to grow to want to put in that extra effort, to go the extra mile, to make things happen because they're going to reap and share in the rewards on the back end. The third piece is you have to be passionate about it. And then I think that shows itself in 2 ways. You can either be really, really passionate about the problem, or you can be really, really passionate about the solution and the way in which you're helping people. So for some founders, just developing a cool piece of SaaS technology is enough of a passion for them to really be able to push forward on a project. They'll come up with a unique solution to a problem that they maybe don't care as much about. I think that's less common, but I think there are a lot of examples of somebody seeing an issue and being like, I can fix that. I don't come from that world. I don't necessarily have a strong passion for it, but I can fix that. And who it's going to impact, that's going to mean a lot to me. Or it's, I have a real passion about this problem. I really want to help solve the waste that is associated with the clothing creation process. And I think I have a way to fix that. Or I really, really am passionate about sales. And I have a way to expedite the sales process for software teams. I think one of those two things are critical to help weather the storm, and where you see almost every successful founder story you hear about these crazy trials and tribulations they go through, and what pushed them generally was one of those two things, because money is not enough to get you there.
Yeah, we hear the passion thing from every guest that we have. one way or another, whether it's just talking to them about how they started or if it ends up in their 3 pieces of advice, the passion thing is a definite rock solid foundation of anybody in any startup to keep moving forward. Now, Tristin, if anybody wanted to get a hold of you and ask for your help in consulting, would the best way for them to find you be to reach out on LinkedIn? Or do you have a website or an email address or anything that you want to plug?
Reaching out via LinkedIn is probably the safest bet. It's the best chance of me kind of seeing it. Otherwise, I'm around at all these different networking events. Come up and introduce yourself. I'd love to hear what people are working on, whether or not you're interested in what I do. I like to hear what you're doing. My passion and what has driven me to do this is I love helping founders be the best version of themselves and create companies that drive impact. And I want to be able to assist them in that journey and help remove as many barriers as possible. That's why I do this. That's how I ended up in this sort of consulting role, is being able to help in a meaningful way as many of these founders as possible, really them and their companies be the best versions of themselves that they can be.
Awesome. I love that.
Thank you very much for your time today, Tristin. Appreciate all the answers you've given us and the advice that you've given. We will link your LinkedIn. We'll double link it. We'll link that in the show notes. So anybody wants to reach out and consult you about your consulting, we can put that in there.
There's a lot of consulting going on. Well done.
And if anybody wants to reach out to us, ask us any questions or leave comments, you could do so below the video here or email us at hello@thebigpixel.net or get in touch through any of our social media channels as well.
Awesome. Thank you, gentlemen, for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, everybody. We will see you next week.
All right.
Have a good one.